Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of the Last Round Boxing Podcast. Before we detail who our guest of the week is here on the Last Round, we wanted to give another shout out to our brand partner at FightsATW.com. That's FightsATW.com. That's where you can get your wrestling news, your boxing news, all in one place. Go check them out. The founder is a really great friend of the podcast in Abraham Gonzalez. He's a great guy. He's doing great work. He's always writing stories. He's doing his own podcast, interviewing fighters, writing stories for professional wrestling in addition to boxing and vice versa. So go check them out, whether you like boxing news or professional wrestling news. You can find that all at FightsATW.com. And our guest this week, he's been on the show previously about twice, I believe, at least twice here on the Last Round. The last time he was on the show, I believe, was during the pandemic. So it's been a couple of years since he's been on the podcast. He's the current executive officer of the California State Athletic Commission under the Department of Consumer Affairs for the state of California. And he previously to the state of California, he was the former executive officer of the Georgia Athletic and Entertainment Commission. He essentially regulates every single show in California, from San Diego all the way up to the border between California and Oregon, the border between Nevada and California, Arizona and California. His commission, his government agency is in charge of regulating pretty much combat sports, boxing, mixed martial arts, which includes UFC and all that. So all you fans who watch these fights and combat sports on TV, this is the guy. This is the guy who's at the top, at least, of the regulatory agency in the state of California. And we talk about a lot of things. We talk about his experience with Riyadh season, the event here in Los Angeles that occurred last year at the BMO Stadium, headlined by Terrence Crawford and Madrimov. We talk about the California State Athletic Commission's recent approval of bare knuckle fighting championship and slap fighting. Andy Foster goes into details about that. He goes into the 2024 commission outlook and the details of what would happen, what he looks over in regards to the 2024 year, what his expectations are in 2025 for the commission. We also touch on how he conducts referee evaluations, at events. So he goes around to these boxing events, MMA events, and he conducts referee evaluations. So he checks those out. And we also touch on the UK commission tax that was recently reported on and what he thinks about that and his thoughts on the British Boxing Board of Control. Since his agency is a government agency and the British Boxing Board of Control is a private entity, that's a very interesting conversation. So there's a lot of details that we go into with him, and we're grateful that he gave us his time. So no further ado, let's turn it to our guest of the week, the executive officer of the California State Athletic Commission. This is Andy Foster.
And now it's time for the Last Round interview of the week.
Mr. Andy Foster of the California State Athletic Commission joins us this week on the Last Round Boxing Podcast. Thank you for joining us, Andy.
Thank you for having me.
So I wanted to start with the California State Athletic Commission approved bare knuckle fighting championship and slap fighting at the end of 2023, in December 2023. Now that it's essentially one full year of approval in 2024. What is your reaction to that? I believe bare knuckle or slap fighting did have a couple of events. I believe bare knuckle might have events in California last year. Is that correct?
I think we had 4.
And what is your take on this first year of approval?
Well, I mean, it would have been, 3 and then 1 this year. So yeah, we've had 4 events. It's a new sport. It's new. It's different than boxing. It's different than mixed martial arts. Probably a lot closer to mixed martial arts, to be honest, than it is boxing. I kind of went into it thinking that our officials would be better at it than they were, because we do so much of both of the other sports, and they have gotten immensely better. But Dan Rigliotta and Andy Glenn, who do this and have been doing it for 4 or 5 years, have such a jump on everybody else that they're teaching our people, and we have them. But I think the main thing about the bare knuckle is the officiating. If you can get the officiating done right, it's pretty gruesome with the amount of cuts that come, but it's not that dangerous in compared. Like, you don't see a significant head trauma, or we haven't saw that yet. We saw a lot of cuts. That's what we saw. Yeah, I mean, we're keeping it going. We kind of like it. But yeah, that's what my thoughts are about that. With Power Slap, we've not done any of those events.
Is there any, with the whole Power Slap situation, or the people behind that? I believe it. I think it's Dana White. Have they approached your department or your agency about potentially staging any California events in 2025?
They have not.
Did you have, because I know there was for the there's one called Chin Check Slapdown Championship that was held in Stockton, California in 2022, and it looks like your commission had your agency had granted them a temporary license for that event during that time. Did you have team members present at that event before, obviously, the approval at the end of 2023?
I'm not familiar with that event.
Well, look, I was researching, and it's a smaller slap fighting, I guess, league that was held in Stockton sometime in 2022, I believe in April. But essentially what I was asking is that if you had anybody from your team, whether you had to travel out of state, obviously maybe to Vegas or any other states, to view this type of sport in person before you guys gave it the approval in 2023.
Oh yeah, we did do that. Yes. Yeah.
Did you personally go and see it, or did you send your team members?
I didn't go. Commissioner Gurrell went to Utah and saw the BKFC show, and Commissioner Fiore saw Power Slap. Maybe a couple of commissioners, but I know Commissioner Fiore did.
Did you attend, because I know BKFC had an event at the Pechanga Casino last year in July. Did you attend that one last year?
I did. Yeah.
What was your impressions being there live and seeing the event for yourself in the flesh?
Well, the first one I saw was Knuckle Mania down there at the Microsoft Theater. So I think the Pechanga event was our second event with those guys. We got a lot better with the Pechanga show with the officiating than we did the first show. So we got better, and then we did Thunder Studios after that, and we got better at that one. So we're getting the hang of it, kind of, but it's like I said, it's a new sport. So I think people don't need to be naive into thinking that just because you can do MMA well or you can do boxing well, you can do this well. These are different. It's so fast. That's what I think. And just the sheer number of knockdowns is kind of like interesting. Like in boxing, it's incredibly rare to see a 10-6 round. Incredibly rare. I mean, I think probably the most famous is what round one of Pacquiao and Juan Manuel Marquez. You'll see 10-6 rounds. Maybe not every event, but it's not rare to see a 10-6 round in bare knuckle. And there have been cases of 10-5s and even a 10-4 round in one of the training tapes, but that referee should have been relieved if you have that many knockdowns in 2 minutes.
You mentioned on how your referees, obviously it's almost kind of like learning on the job for this new sport. I mean, what are the biggest concerns or the biggest hardships in this first year that your referees have been telling you, like, hey, how do we approach this? This is kind of difficult, like to judge or to kind of handle this situation.
I think the judging part is relatively, you can usually figure out who won that round in the bare knuckle. At least in my opinion, you can, because the damage is you can see it, pretty visible. The refereeing, you have to stay on top of it because the knockdowns happen quick. Sometimes you have the MMA fighters that come to the bare knuckle, and so if a person's down, you have to make sure, sometimes a knee might drop and that's a downed fighter, you've got to make sure that they don't follow up with a punch or something on the ground. You got to watch the back of the head a little bit. You've got to watch the incidental, and I do mean it truly incidental guillotine chokes that are just instinctive when they come in like that with MMA fighters. You don't see that in traditional boxing. The holding's a little bit different. But the biggest difference is it's fast. It's really fast, and it's 2-minute rounds, and these guys can do a lot of damage to each other's faces in 2 minutes. And you also see a good bit more body shots. John McCarthy explained this to me, and I think this was kind of a good way, because a lot of it's like think of the top part of the head, this is pretty hard to hit with the bare fist, and said, Andy, you might hit a wall, think of a wall or whatever, one time. You're probably not going to do it twice, and the body is a lot. It's a lot softer. It's a lot like there's tissue to hit or whatever. Even if somebody's in good shape, it's going to feel a lot better than hitting a skull. Of course, the bottom part of the face down here, it's a little bit softer on the hands. Not a whole lot softer, but it's softer on the hands. So I was surprised at the number of body shots in some respects.
What was the biggest concern that you had as the head of the State Athletic Commission of California before you guys gave it full approval? Was there anything that you're like, okay, we need to do some more research on this or kind of follow up on this in terms of questioning? Was there anything that kind of sticks out in your mind?
Well, look, before the unified rules were adopted for bare knuckle, you essentially had promoters making their own rules up as they go. That was a problem for me because you didn't have anybody that actually looked at these rules. This is just a promoter made up these rules, which I suppose you can say is okay, but if you're going to have a real sport, you have the ABC unified rules, you have the ABC unified rules of mixed martial arts and of boxing. You've got nothing from bare knuckle. Once they got rules, in my mind, they became a sport. So that was kind of the first thing. The second thing, and probably as equally important, is the matchmaking. When they first started, they were using a lot of the older mixed martial arts fighters who had sort of transitioned out. And you still see some of that, but there's a lot less of that now. You're starting to see people that are starting, they're wanting to be bare knuckle fighters. They're younger. They're training this. They're training bare knuckle, and there are some people that this sport really is good for them. It's really Ben Rothwell comes to mind. He just won this weekend really well, and I've watched Ben a long time. with the fights, and he did quite well in MMA. So it's not like he's a bad fighter or anything, but this really suits him well. This sport. He's big, he hits hard, and he's real tough. Somebody like that, the other champion that they have, his name escapes me, but he's very good at it. He's pretty good in the UFC, but he's really good at this.
So is the threshold, I'm assuming, is it higher for bare knuckle in terms of medical evaluations from, like in your guys' approval for approving an opponent or a fight to go forward, just because it is bare knuckle essentially, and there's no like a boxing glove, for example, there's padding there. So is there a lower threshold in it, for lack of a better term, in boxing than there is for bare knuckle?
No, I think it's probably even. I mean, boxing is you can't take as many punches in bare knuckle as you can in boxing. Your face is not going to hold up. It's just you're not going to hold up. Your hand or your face is not going to hold up. So boxing is something that we definitely take a look at that really hard. Bare knuckle too. I mean, it's just they're just different. They're just different sports. But I mean, I don't mean, but I mean, you can understand. We're talking about 10 minutes of fighting with bare knuckle, whereas, I mean, let's take even a 4-round boxing match. 12 minutes and 6, 18. You get it. It's longer, and I do think exposure matters. I mean, there's this nonsense going around in bare knuckle that I totally do not believe. Okay. And then there's this, I call it a fable, to use Mark Royer's word, a fable, that 3 minutes of bare knuckle fighting is just as safe as 2 minutes of bare knuckle fighting. That's stupid. Like that doesn't even make sense to me. If you're talking about, and that's why when the unified rules were written, one of the biggest problems I have with the bare knuckle unified rules is you can have 2 minutes or 3 minutes, depending on what the promoter wants to do. That's nonsense. You don't let the person, you don't let the promotion choose in the unified rules what the number of rounds are. That doesn't make any kind of sense in anybody's mind. In my mind, it certainly doesn't make any sense. So I think 2 minute rounds is a good number. You get a lot of action. You get 10 minutes worth of exposure, and I think that the amount of exposure absolutely matters.
So is that something right now that's not, I guess, solidified in stone in the state of California for the time of rounds? So it could be 2 or 3 minutes at the moment?
We will only approve 2 minute rounds in California.
Okay. So they can't go above 2 minutes even if they wanted to.
Even if they wanted to.
You mentioned the word nonsense, and I don't know if you would categorize this as nonsense, but there was a quote that you gave to a boxing scene recently about there was a UK commission tax that I believe it's 2% that is of the fighter purse that goes to the British Boxing Board of Control. Your quote was, "There's so many things wrong with this. The commission is not a business." I'm assuming that you're talking about your commission. "It's a government agency. We are here to protect the public, not profit off of our licensees." What is your reaction to that? Because the British Boxing Board of Control is a private entity, and as opposed to, in comparison to your agency, which is a publicly funded agency, what's your reaction to this whole 2% tax to a fighter purse to pay that, like the British Boxing Board of Control?
Well, I was meaning that quote in relation to the way we do things, because I think that, because think about it, like, it's not just the 2% that the fighter's having to pay to the Triple BOC. You have to pay, 2% to the sanctioning body. It's 2 or 3, depends on which one it is. But so you've got some money there, and if you've got multiple belts, then you're talking about more. If you've got 3 belts, goodness, you got 4 belts, which happens occasionally. Now we're up into some money. You're going to pay your trainer. You got to pay your manager. The promoter's going to want their cut. I just see these fee deductions, and then, of course, the fighter. I know we're talking about the fights in Saudi, but like, if you're talking about the United States, the feds are going to take their cut. I mean, usually, especially for out-of-country fighters, but you're going to have to pay your federal income tax. And then if you're in a state that requires state income tax, I guess the point I'm making is you can be left with not that much money at the end of the day. And the kind of purses that they're talking about in Saudi, I mean, these are some pretty big purses that we're talking about. So, like, say a fighter's making $1 million, I mean, that's 20 grand just for the sanction on one side. Then you're going to get it from the other side. And this is going to go on down through the card. Of course, I think the Triple BOC makes deals, or it's less. I don't think it's always 2%. I mean, I've heard this. I don't know this for sure, but
Right.
but Lance told me that it was 2%, and I was surprised that it's that much without a cap. I mean, it would be fine, I suppose. Let's say it was 2% with a cap across the entire card, I suppose. I mean, there's ways to get there where it ends up being like an effective of maybe 1/4% or 1/2 of 1% or something. If that's the way you want to do it, it's probably better just to assess it to the promoter and let the promoter pay the money.
Has your team ever had, any contact with the British Boxing Board of Control in terms of trying to mirror how you guys do business?
Oh, I mean, I have a good relationship with Robert Smith, and I don't have any problem. They're welcome here anytime. It wasn't disparaging on Robert or anything. I just thought I didn't know that's the way that they funded their commission, and I was surprised when Lance told me that it's 2%.
Was there ever, because you've been at the head of the California State Athletic Commission since about 2012, I believe. I believe that's when you came into the position. During that time, and in the 12, 13 years, I believe it's your 13th year now. Has there ever been a chance that the Triple BOC could go publicly funded over there? Like, when you've had maybe any contact with Robert Smith or anybody over there?
Yeah, I've never heard of anything like. I've never heard of that. Yeah, I've not heard of that. I mean, the way the California State Athletic Commission is funded is, so we don't take a general fund, like we take an appropriation, but it's not from the general fund. We have caps on like the gate and the TV. And so the promoter pays us 5% up to a certain amount. It's 5% of the gate up to 200,000. So any event that does more than 4 million at the gate, you can't get any more of that. And then the TV is 35,000 cap. So anything more than a $700,000 TV contract, you can't get any more of that. So the most the commission can collect on a single event is 235,000. Most of the events, as you know, in California are much smaller than that. And the commission, again, I say this just so you can understand, the commission is not a business. We're not in business to make a profit. We're in business to regulate the sport. But the commission is revenue negative, I suppose, if you want to use that term. If it was a business, you'd say you'd lose money, but we're revenue negative on well over half of the events that we regulate. And that's just because of the cost of regulating, the cost of the inspectors, the cost of drug testing, the cost of doing the things in the office, all these different things. But that's certainly a lot better, but that's just the nature of the way that we're set up. The legislature has set it up in that way.
What do you think, looking back at 2024 for the commission, what do you think it was the most significant moment for your team or your commission, whether it was a rule change or regulation change? I mean, looking back on 2024, what stands out in your mind?
Well, I mean, probably 2024 was the start of the bare knuckle stuff. So, I mean, that's a new sport. That's a pretty big deal. We never had done that before. So that was a big change. And then also the beginning of the MMA pension, the pension, that was a pretty substantial change.
Can you expand on the pension? I was going to ask a follow up on that, but just because it was the first year last year, what does the first year look like?
So MMA is not as big of a sport as boxing. Okay, in California, I know it is most places, but in California, it seems like we deposited, I don't want to tell you wrong, but about $50,000 from the first year into the fund, something like that. And I thought that was good for the first year because you're not going to have everybody that's going to vest, but the people that do vest when they turn 50, they'll have some money at the end.
Do you know off the top of your head how many retired MMA fighters utilized it in this first year?
Well, see, you got to vest, Danny. So you got to fight 39 rounds.
Right. Was there any that reached that threshold in this last year?
Oh, no,
first year, but
no, nobody fought 12 times in 2024 in California.
Okay, so it's not it doesn't backdate, is what you're saying.
Right, correct. It's moving forward. Yes, right.
Okay. I misunderstood. I thought there was like a backdate back to a certain point, but it's from 2024 forward.
That's why it's like new, yes, and that's why exactly 100%. You see the way it works, so it's like moving forward. So I think we had some guys fought 3 or 4 times, but they'll start accumulating it. It'll eventually we'll have some people that vest. We're getting ready to send out statements.
What do you want to see in the MMA pension and that whole situation that maybe occurred in the boxing pension side? Because the boxing pension with California has been around for quite a while. So, I mean, something that, the boxing pension has done well over time, obviously. What do you want to see that from the MMA side now that it's new?
Well, I mean, I think what we've got to do, Danny, is we've got to expand the revenue streams. Okay, for both funds, not just for MMA, but for boxing and mixed martial arts. And here's what I mean by that. Tickets is the way we fund it. Ticket sales. When COVID happened, can you imagine what happened to the revenue in the pension fund? I mean, I didn't really think about that. Okay, I didn't really think about that. So, I mean, I don't know if anybody was planning for that, but anyway, that was a phenomenon that none of us were ready for. I don't think, and didn't really think about that. So now we're looking at additional revenue streams, a potential license plate that we're looking at. Commissioner Scott Wetch is discussing like a 50-50 raffle. I mean, these are some ideas that he's brought forward. Commissioner Fiore has brought forward some sponsorship opportunities. These are things that we're looking at to potentially fund the pension fund even further. So, like, let's like play it out a little bit. So let's say we have ticket sales, we have like a 50-50 raffle, we have potential license plate, we have sponsorship opportunities. Now you're talking about like 4 different revenue streams that are going into this thing. So we're talking about real money that are starting to accumulate into this fund for these fighters. And then eventually, and again, we're not there yet, but you've asked about the ideas. If we could provide some way, work with the UC system or with provide a way for our athletes once they're done fighting, if they wanted to do something with college or trade or anything like that, we could provide some kind of thing through the pension program of their account to maybe provide some tuition assistance or pay for it totally with their money. I think these are ideas that are beneficial where we're trying to provide some level of opportunity or some level of assistance for folks.
Is there any other states that have approached your team or yourself and tried to get details on, the pension funds that you guys have offered for boxing and MMA, and maybe they're exploring the possibility of creating one themselves for those specific states?
No.
Not even like New York or Texas, more populous states like that?
No.
All right, is California the only state in the United States that has that at the moment?
Yes. By the way, and I'm from Georgia, so I can say this, and I've lived here for 12 or 13 years, like you said, but the one thing that I can say about California as was an outsider, I'm an insider now, but they absolutely cares about its boxers. I mean, it does not treat the boxers. I'm talking about from the politicians all the way down. This state cares about. They do. I mean, everybody over there at that legislature, everybody. I'm warmly received when I go to the legislature to talk about boxing and try to help, do something with legislation. It's been kind of an eye-opening experience because this state does care about the boxers.
You mentioned the legislature and how they care. Who would you say is the biggest, I guess, fan of either MMA or boxing or both in the legislature that you've had contact with over the years?
Assembly Member Haney carried the pension bill for MMA. He likes it. Assembly Member Fiore. I'm sorry, that's my commissioner. Heath. It'll come to me in a minute. But Flora, Assembly Member Flora, he likes it. He's been very helpful. Senator Archuleta, I think he's going out now, but he was always incredibly helpful. But it's not just it's all of them. I mean, they have just. I've not had a bad reception from one legislator that I can remember. They've been interested. They've been, they're all. They'll all talk to me if I need to talk with them. But I've got it kind of moving in a good way now, so I don't have to go over there quite as much. When I first got the job, the commission was had some issues, and
Has there ever been like I think I know in I believe 2017 they tried to amend the Muhammad Ali Federal Act, I believe to include MMA. I believe at the time, but I don't believe it was passed. I believe it was introduced, but it wasn't passed. Were you ever involved in any, by like any federal partners or the federal government in terms of, updating the law for combat sports or anything like that, in addition to the Muhammad Ali Act?
No, not directly.
Has there been any talk about making any state laws in regards to, like the Ali Act or anything like that?
There was some discussion about that at one point. But California has a very elaborate regulatory scheme that's already in place. Like a lot of it mirrors many of the protections the Ali Act has, especially with the contracts and all that type of thing. So, I think. Especially with the minimum purse that we just passed last year, legislature, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but the legislature passed the minimum purse. So they did that UCLA study, and this, I'll weave it back in with the Ali Act, but the Ali Act is in general to protect boxers. I think you would agree with that. That's a general idea. One of the biggest things that I saw when I first got to California was this idea of a lot of the kids from TJ were coming over and I kept seeing these dollar contracts. You ever seen a dollar contract? There was like,
Yeah.
Okay. And what they were doing is they was giving them tickets and they were selling them. I'm not talking about on big shows, I'm not on club shows. And I thought, man, this ain't right. Even in Georgia, we had a minimum purse. It's $50 a round, but it's still, still a minimum purse. So, and I think in 2015 or 2016, something like that, I don't know, about 2015, we passed the $100 a round minimum purse. And that had really good effects. UCLA, Professor Mondragon did that study. I don't know if you've read that, but that was a good study. And that had positive effects on California boxers. So then last year, the legislature, at the commission's request, increased that legislatively to $200 per round. So now the minimum you can make on a 4-rounder in California is $800. Now, I'm not saying like $800 life-changing money. I'm not trying to suggest any of that. But $800 will get you home. Again, that sets a floor. And most of the time, promoters will now pay more than the floor. So a lot of times you'll see $1,000 as being the floor. And you can just negotiate from there. And, I think, Professor Mondragon suggested a higher amount in his study. I know the industry pretty well, talking to a lot of the promoters. I don't think I can make them stomach much more than $200 a round right now, because 100 to 200 is a big shift. But they were already paying more than the 100. This just moved the floor up. So in relation to the Ali Act, we have the contract provisions that are oversaw with the Attorney General's office. And we do a lot of like bigger type contracts with managers and promoters. And I've done a whole lot of people that you would know. So yeah, we have the protections in place that protects both sides. And with the minimum purse put in place and with the pension program, I think California, and I can say this quite honestly, I think California has the most protective regulatory scheme of any athletic commission, certainly in this country. And I don't know of any place in the world that has this kind of regulatory scheme that protects boxers better.
And the minimum purse applies to both boxing and MMA?
It does, yes.
Does that also recently, since bare knuckle and power slap,
all of it, sure, all of it,
all under one umbrella?
Yeah.
Your commission recently posted about at a Golden Boy event down here in Los Angeles about your self-conducting referee evaluations. Can you walk us through what a referee evaluation consists of while you're there at an event?
Sure. Yeah, I have to do them once a year. And I was down there, I just chose to do them on Ivan Guillermo and Rudy Bergen while I was down there. You want to look at your stoppages, you want to look at your recognition of fouls, your interaction with the doctors, your interaction with the commission table, how you actually look. Do you look like because that matters. Is your shirt pressed? Did you show up on time? I mean, it all figures into the score of it. And then the idea is to provide them some feedback so that they can work on, just improving. Where, like, how do you get better? And they both did really, really well. One of the things that I think I mentioned to Rudy was he did a great job. I forget which fight it was, but he did a great job in, I think, the 5th round. And I wanted him to do a little bit more of that in the 6th round in this fight where if you've got a fighter who's getting hit a lot, but they're still defending, because the public is watching this as well, even though the referee knows these punches really aren't doing much, you still need to verbalize. They need to make some movements to advance this thing. Like, get out of there, show me something. There's a lot of ways referees can provide some kind of movement so that a fighter's not continuing. But taking 30, 40 punches, and I'm exaggerating here, but taking 30, 40 unanswered punches is not what we're looking for. We want to see a fight be competitive, or they don't get to continue.
What do you think is the not hardest, but I guess the most, difficult aspect of a referee's job in terms of what you evaluate? Like, okay, over the years since you've been, involved in combat sports and evaluations like this, like what do you see as the most common, difficulty for referees as they're being evaluated? Like, oh, okay, that's very common for them to adapt to.
Well, I mean, so in boxing, it's different in mixed martial arts because, and we could go into that if you're interested, but
yeah,
in boxing, you have an A side and you have a B side usually, okay? And the promoter usually has the A side on the bigger fight cards. On the smaller ones, it's different, but on the bigger sides, and like up the Golden Boy show, I think it's fair to say you can look at that red corner, look at the Golden Boy sheet, the red corner. I mean, a lot of times that red corner wins,
Yeah.
And the idea is the promoter is essentially wanting to get their fighter advanced because a loss in boxing hurts a lot more than a loss in MMA for whatever reason. I mean, it's harder to come back from. But you want to give the fighter work, and you've got to pass the muster of getting me to approve it, getting the commission to approve it. But it's got to be right. It's got to be reasonable enough to get approved, but you still want to be favored to win. And it's kind of like a balancing act. And the trick with the referees is, giving them enough information so that they know what they're dealing with. Okay, and we provide them a boxing severity index and different notes on the different fighters each time they come. But probably the biggest thing is this commission sanctions competitions. We don't sanction beatings. Okay, it's probably not the most. That's probably not the best way to put it, but we don't. I don't like that. I want the fight to be somewhat. I mean, I might know who's going to win, but we still let I don't know. I don't follow football too well, but if you have a bad NFL team and they play the Kansas City Chiefs, we still let them play. Okay, even if they get beat a lot. And this is a different kind of a thing. We have to be a little bit more careful with this, and even with like football, because the idea is like basically that's one of the ways you win is knock somebody out. Okay, so be careful with that. But we provide our referees enough information. So one of the biggest things that they've had to adapt to, I suppose, with me versus before is I need them to read the information, get the information, and then use the information so that they can that can be one thing out of their toolbox so that they can be a better referee and protect the fighter better. That's kind of a long answer for your question.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. And since you're around, obviously a lot of these events in person and all that, and you've been around the California events, especially, for over 12 years now, or coming up on your 13th year. You have contacts and, with promoters, managers, fighters, pretty much everybody. I'm talking about everybody outside of your commission structure, promoters, fighters, managers, all that. What would you say is the biggest, I don't want to call it criticism, but like, when you see these people at events and they say, oh, Mr. Foster or Andy, you say you like this, but we don't think it works. It works too great. We recommend maybe you should change like this in California. What's the one thing that's been sustaining in terms of like, I guess if you can call it a criticism.
Let's see. I mean, we always have like these certain groups of people that not going to like us no matter what. I've got one group. There's small group that doesn't like. I don't like the kids fighting each other with no regulation. I'm talking about children. And we regulated that, and that took a lot of there was a certain group that really, really was adamant that we should let the kids. I mean, they weren't fighting like MMA, but they were fighting like, I don't know. It's pancreation. It's rough enough, it's rough. And so that needs some regulation. I don't know. It don't need to be regulated like professional MMA, but it needs a doctor there. You need some things there for that. The children need at least physical stuff. And there's some people that didn't like that. I think we've gotten a lot better. This is one of the complaints that we'd gotten, and we fixed this with the advent of Zoom. But it used to take us quite a long time in the contract process. I mean, we were a month, 6 weeks, sometimes 2 months out on getting contracts signed because, you have to bring everybody together. Where you're going to meet, we have to sign an inspector, the whole spiel. And then I have to sign it after it's done. And now we've got it so we can do it on Zoom. And Assistant Chief Athletic Inspector Sean Wells has been kind of taking over that. And that's gotten much more streamlined. So instead of being delayed 6 weeks, 2 months, we're getting it done within a week or 2 weeks, something like that.
On the other side of that question, what is the most consistent praise that you get from people outside of the commission, managers, promoters, fighters, people involved in MMA and combat sports in general? What is the biggest praise that you get in regards to the California Commission?
Well, a lot of people think we give them a fair shake. I know some people don't agree with that, but a lot of people think that. I got that just recently. They like our referees. I mean, referees really, people don't really, I know you have me on this show, but people don't really know me. They don't even see me. You have to be down pretty deep in the weeds to know my name, okay? But they're going to know who Herb Dean is. Mike Beltran. I mean, Jack Reese just retired, but everybody knows that name. Tom Taylor, Ray Corona. They're going to know those names. And those people are the face of the commission in many ways. And, I feel like in California, we have the best referees in the world. I really believe that. I mean, here, I'll provide you some evidence of that. Okay. Where do our referees work everywhere in the world. Okay. But they started here. Okay. Herb Dean works in Nevada just about every time there's a UFC. Okay. Or really anywhere there's a UFC. Mike Beltran. Tom Taylor is a high level. I think he's done Canelo. I don't know. I know he's working over there with Benavidez this weekend. I'm not sure which one he's got, but he's over there. Ray Corona goes a lot of places. He's super high level referee. We've got some others that are coming along. I got a guy, Ray Armadillas. I'm moving him. I think he's doing a good job. Rudy and Ivan, they're coming along. I've got a pipeline of referees. Ed Calantes up north does a really, really good job for us. And then with our ringside positions, I mean, look, man, Paul Wallace, Dr. Wallace is he's been around so long. He's forgot more about ringside medicine than most ringside physicians know. This guy he is so good at his job. Dr. Allende in Fresno is good. Tariq Khan, one of our newer physicians, has gotten so many reps. But we do so much volume in California that these guys get so many repetitions that the referees, we have a good official system where the referees and the ringside positions work really close together. Is we can keep them safe, but we keep them competitive. I'll give you an example. Man, Dr. Wallace will let things go until it's unsafe, and then he'll stop it. But he doesn't get queasy with blood. He's not. I mean, you remember Oscar Valdez and Scott Quigg, I'm sure.
Yeah.
He let
Carson,
that go.
yeah.
He let that go in the pouring rain. You remember that night?
Yeah, it was in Carson, yeah.
Yeah, it was raining sideways on us. We were drenched, but he let that thing go. And, I mean, that's just a testament to his ability. And then, if it's real bad, I mean, didn't he stop Klitschko at the Staples Center? I think it was Dr. Wallace stopped the Klitschko fight. If it's bad, he'll stop it.
The Areola, when he fought Areola?
I believe it was. Wasn't that the one? I believe it was. It was before my time with the commission, but yeah, it was he was widely, I mean, I don't say criticized because he did the right thing, but that was controversial to stop that big of a fight. But I mean, he did it. So if it's dangerous, he'll stop it. But he, I'm using Paul Wallace as Dr. Paul Wallace is just kind of the thing, because when it's a big fight and it's a main event, it's 99.9% going to be Paul Wallace's call at that last event.
What was your impression of the Riyadh season inaugural U.S. card, which obviously happened in Los Angeles last year? I'm assuming you were there in person. What was your impression of how the event was promoted, how it unfolded while you were there? How was your commission team members treated?
Yeah, it was a wonderful event. Wonderful event. Next time that they come, I think we'll have a better understanding. Because mainly I was working with Matchroom initially, and I'll tell you, Steve Bash helped a lot with that event. I think that event could have went poorly if Steve Bash had not been involved, because he fixed a lot of stuff on that event, and I appreciate him about that. Without naming names, I won't let certain people in the locker rooms anymore. We learned about this, okay? But I will tell you that we had the glove problem with Terrence Crawford. Never really had that problem before, and for it to happen on that big of a fight was just. I mean, I'm literally on the phone with Elvis Grant, who happened to be there. He wasn't going to. I don't think he was going to come, and I got him to come. He brought a bag of gloves, and when that second pair split or whatever, I called him and said, "You got any more?"
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, it was good that he was there, but we got it all done. It all got done, and His Excellency Mr. Turkey was very, very cool with my commissioners, and it was wonderful for them to be here, and we welcome them to come again anytime they'd like to. It was a really, really cool event. A lot of moving parts, but it was a really, really good event.
Were you able to talk directly with Turki Alalshikh while you were there?
Well, I mean, I said hello to him and shook his hand and stuff, but I didn't. That's something that my commissioners would they spent some time with him, talking with him, but I was dealing with other things. Plus, that's more for my commissioners to deal with.
What's your take on this potential boxing league that's been reported? I believe the New York Times was initially the ones who broke the story recently, but Endeavor, which owns TKO Holdings Group, and Riyadh Season or Saudi Arabia are reportedly putting together a boxing league. What's your take on that? Because obviously, as the largest commission in the United States, I'm sure you have an opinion on that.
Well, I mean, look, yeah. I'll just give you my opinion, man. I don't know if there's a better promoter in the world than Dana White. I mean, really, is promoting stuff, he's good at it. And Hunter Campbell has got to be he's got to be one of the smartest people I've ever met. I mean, he is good at what he does. Okay. So, and again, I don't know. I've only heard the rumors, so and the reports. But I know that if they have anything to do with, I'm talking about absent the UFC, because I don't think the UFC. I mean, but if it's TKO, look, TKO does things well. I mean, the WWE is doing well, UFC's doing well, and so I think that if the UFC, I think if the UFC, I shouldn't say the UFC, but if TKO gets involved in boxing, it will do wonders for boxing. That's my opinion. So we'll see if I'm right, but I think that if anybody knows how to promote, it's those guys.
Did you guys ever? I mean, maybe it was before your time, but didn't at one point the California Commission look to regulate professional wrestling in California? And then it just kind of it was more. They realized it was more like a show or entertainment. I mean, was there ever a point like that, at least during your career?
Well, look, it's still in the books. A lot of the regulations are repealed, but it's still in the law. And we do have oversight over them. I sent an inspector the other day for the first time in a long time just to watch. Okay. But man, look, when I was in Georgia, they started this stuff. Okay. And like the big deal was, let's regulate. I think at that time it was called WWF, but I could be wrong. It might have been WWF. But let's regulate this because we can get a bunch of revenue from it. Man, I just couldn't get there. I deregulated them when I was big day. I did. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, again, now look, a lot of it comes down to intent to me. I think wrestling is kind of dangerous. Like, there's ways to get hurt in that stuff. It's like acrobatics and it's gymnastics. I mean, look, it's dangerous. Okay. And I think that they should do maybe a lot less of that, where they put the little razor underneath the thing and they cut themselves, I mean, come on, like we could probably do without some of that. But that's not really, I don't really feel like that's just me talking. It is like just my opinion, not as a regulatory figure. I don't think that something where the intent isn't to hurt your opponent. I don't think we need regulation. That's my opinion, but I don't think we need regulation on that in the sense that this needs to be regulated directly by the state. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be, and I'm not in favor of directly regulating wrestling entertainment. That's my opinion.
And then, just to round into the finish line here, Andy, what are your expectations for CSAC this year in 2025, now that we're talking here in January, at the beginning of the year?
Look, man, I've got a lot of, I got a lot of things that I would like to see happen this year. Like a lot of stuff in the pipeline, but, we're going to be submitting that license plate to DMV for approval. Yeah. Because that was in a public meeting. So we're doing that. We're trying to get that for the fighters, and that'd be really cool. And if we get that done, maybe I can come back on your show and try to promote that thing. But
absolutely, yeah.
Down the road. But I feel like that's a big thing. Commissioner Ron Fiore has been working the sponsorship thing. And I think that would be really, really cool, really good thing for the fighters. I mean, that, and then, Commissioner Wetch has been working this other thing with the 50-50 raffle, and I haven't really talked with him about where he's at with it, but I know he can get things done at the legislature, probably better than anybody I know, so he's very good at that. Chairman Villegas has a lot of really good ideas that he's been working up. So operationally, I mean, these are things that we think are pretty. These things are pretty cool. And then with the operation, we're still working with the Spare Knuckle, and I think I talked to David Feldman the other day, and he's looking to bring 6 or 7 shows in 2025. to the state of California. We have that GFL. You've heard that, the Global Fight League. They're looking to bring some stuff here. That Pro Max, they're looking to bring some stuff here. So we're seeing this shift in this transition from like a streaming, or from a traditional broadcast model to like a streaming model. But it's starting to catch up, and California being as big of a market it is, we just have a lot of high hopes. We just got to be adapt. We've got to adapt. We've got to be up with the times, know what's going on, and make sure that we're on top of the curve so we adapt. But yeah, got a lot of good things in the pipeline, hopefully for 2025. I got high hopes for 2025.
That's great. That's great. Well, Andy, we definitely appreciate you jumping here on the last round. Like you said, especially once the personalized license plate gets approved, you're more than welcome to return to promote that and everything else under the sun at the California State Athletic Commission.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. So make sure to follow us at the Last Round 12 on social media. And once again, thanks to the Executive Officer of the California State Athletic Commission, Andy Foster. I'm Danny Z. This is the Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at the Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is the Last Round Podcast.